and welcome. I'm Schofield, one of the learning leaders here at dormakaba. Today we're going to do a quick video on the Simplex installation of an LP1000. That's our exit trim version. So when we first get the lock, it's going to be in a box, and when we open that box up, we're going to find several parts inside that box. The first thing we're going to look at is the front lock housing. Then we're going to have a reinforcement plate. We're going to have an accessory pack that'll obtain some screws, a bit wrench, a pick. You're going to have in with the screws 4 Phillips headed countersunk screws, 4 threaded bushings, and 4 non-threaded bushings, and then 4 through bolts that are going to hold the lock onto the door. So the first thing we got to do after we get our accessory pack out and identify all those parts, we're going to start marking up the door. Now there'll be a template provided in your manual, so you need to use that by taping that template over the door, making sure that you align the vertical and horizontal center lines over the 1 3/4 inch hole with the respective vertical and horizontal lines of your panic device's cam. Now that's very important that you get that cam centered right over the center line of that hole. Then we're going to mark 5 drill points. Once we have that centered, we're going to mark 5 drill points onto our door, and we're going to repeat it on both sides of the door. Now this is what a template looks like. This is not an actual template. This is just a photocopy of one. This is not to scale. The one that'll be in your kit will be to scale. So you can simply tape it on the door by using this center line right here, making sure it is directly over the drive hub on your exit device, because we want to make sure that tailpiece stays nice and straight. Next, we're going to have 4 mounting holes, which are right here, and they're going to go all the way through the door, as well as this center hole right here will also protrude all the way through the door, so you'll have to cut from both sides of the door. Now many times when you install this, you'll be actually replacing some other trim that may have been on that exit device itself. I've got a good example of that I've brought in today to actually mount to. This is something that's had several other locks mounted to it. So I thought this would be a good example to try to cover most of the, most of the applications you'll run to, out there in the field, and give you a good idea of how to line everything up. So what we're going to do, once we got our door marked up from both sides of the door, we're going to use a hole saw with a pilot bit to drill that 1 3/4 hole from both sides of the door. And then we're going to use the 3/8 inch drill bit to cut those 4 other holes that we're going to need to mount the lock to the door itself. So once we get all the doors marked up and we get the actual holes cut in the door, and we make sure that our 1 3/4 inch hole is lined up directly with the center line of that exit device actuator, we're going to now have to install our key override cylinder. Now depending on which key override cylinder you ordered it in, you're going to see a couple of different variations. You may see some drive pins, or you may just see a round actuator up in there. We need to make sure that actuator or those drive pins are timed properly, 1, to get the cores in smoothly, and 2, to make sure that once the core is installed, that when you turn the key, that it actually retracts the latch on the exit device. If we remove the key and pull our lever down and it actually retracts the exit trim latch without having the key inserted, or not putting in the code, then we've got the timing wrong, and we're going to have to take that core back out and turn that actuator or those pins 180 degrees and then reinstall it. And I'll actually show you how you do that when we go to actually mount this thing. And then lastly, the next thing we need to do before we actually get to installing it on the door is we need to make sure that we have our tailpiece timed correctly with the exit hub actuator. So our tailpiece actually goes directly into the exit actuator hub to actually pull the latch back. So we need to make sure that it's dead straight in the center line of our hole, so we're not off, up and down, or off right and left at all. We need to be pretty dead center on this for a smooth operating lock. So to do that, we need to make sure that we get the angle of our tailpiece on our L1000 adjusted right. And then we also need to make sure that we get the exit device set up where it's to the point of that hub almost retracting that latch. So I'll show you how to do that when we actually do the install portion of this. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the back plate off of our lock itself, and we're going to loosen 3 set screws, and we're actually going to take that cam and put it at the same angle, at the angle that we're going to have to insert it in our exit device hub. So we'll show you how to do that in just a little bit. So for everything we do on a left-hand door, we're going to turn all these devices counterclockwise. And for a right-hand setup, if you order a right-hand version of this lock, we're going to do everything clockwise. So it's left hand is going to be counterclockwise, right-handed locks are going to be clockwise. So this, when I do this demonstration in a minute, you'll see if you've got a right-handed setup, just turn it the opposite direction and it works the exact same way. So I appreciate you listening to that portion of the presentation. Now we're going to actually dive into actually getting this thing mounted on the door and actually changing the combination for you. So as you can see here on the table, we have our 4 non-threaded bushings, our 4 threaded bushings, our 4 through bolts, our pick, and our Torx, and it is high security, it does have the pin in the middle, our Torx wrench for changing the combination. And then we have our reinforcement plate here, and then we have our 4 countersunk threaded screws. Now that's what we're going to be using to connect the back plate to the actual lock body itself. This is what the lock body looks like. As you can see here, that's where the core would go for the key override. And in this version right here, I can look down this hole, if I can get it in the camera right, and we can actually see that's going to be for a slag. So that's set up for a slag. I can tell that by the actuator, the way the actuator looks in there. If it was set up for one of our best small format cores, you would actually see 2 drive pins there. But we're going to rotate those around to make sure that when we install our core, that when we turn and pull our lever down, our tailpiece does not move like it does right there. So that's our goal, is to make sure this thing, our tailpiece is actually rotating in the correct direction to retract our latch on our exit device. So the first thing we need to do is mount our exit device. The exit device in this case has already been mounted. As you can see, this is a mount from a mount that's had a lot of locks on it over the years. I think we've had Simplex 5000s on here, Simplex 1000s on here. You will not need this hole and this hole. Generally, when you go to a job site, this 2 1/8 inch hole will probably already be there in most cases. If it's not, that's where we're going to line our center hub up here. As you can see, I've got it lined up dead center of my hole. That's what we're using our template to line up, is on this drive hub right here for our exit device. So what we'll have on the door, we'll have this hole. It may be 2 1/8, it may be 1 3/4 inches, but it has to be at least 1 3/4 inches for it to work. And then we have our 2 holes here that are 3/8, and those are the holes that are actually going to hold it onto the door. So we'll go and first thing we need to do is look at our actuator up in here. So our actuator, if we stick something in there, I'm going to have to get it out of the way a little bit, there we go. We stick it in there, if you notice, it's got a lot of movement back and forth. So we have to set this at an angle so it's about to the point where it's going to start to retract that latch. As you can see on the back side, it's got play in both directions. So as we said, we've got a left-handed lock, so we need to turn it which way? Counterclockwise. And then we're going to take our screwdriver out, and now you can see, instead of it being straight across like this one, straight across with little to no movement, this one we won't have to adjust. This one, because of the movement, we have to adjust and leave it at that angle. Now we've got to match the angle of that with the angle of our tailpiece on our lock itself. So we're going to do what? We're going to turn it counterclockwise until it stops. All right, this one stops because it's new, and right out of the box it's going to stop where it is completely horizontal. All right, Of course, you can see if you look in this hole, that's not going to work because if I tried to mate it up right now, it's not going to go in there. Now on this one here, it's not a problem at all. It would mount straight up. So I can get this turned around. Will actually mount straight up, so there's no adjustment needed. Now on this one, as you can see, there's a pretty good amount of adjustment needed. I mean, it's very, very far being off horizontal, right? So we're going to take, there's 2 screws on this back plate. Once we've turned our tailpiece counterclockwise as far as it'll go, we'll remove these 2 screws. Once those 2 screws have been removed, we'll carefully grab the back plate and lift it off and set it aside. Now, if we can get a close-up of here, there we go. This is the cam actuator we're going to have to get in time. So right now, when it comes on the factory, it's going to be sitting in about that position there once we turn it all the way counterclockwise. So as you can see, maybe, it's very, very short, there's 1, 2, and 3 little set screws down in there. If I can rotate it slowly so you can see all 3. Yep, all 3 set screws. So all 3 of those set screws are going to have to be loosened. So that's going to require you to have a little Allen set. You're going to loosen those screws. So loosen that one. Loosen that one. Come around here and loosen my last one, making sure that I'm keeping this thing turned counterclockwise the whole time. And now I can take it and I can sit this on back on my actuator. And then very carefully, once I've got it on there, I'm going to turn it to try to match that slot by going counterclockwise. So I'm going to turn it till I match it. And I think that looks about right. Yeah, that looks about right. Yeah, I think I'm good with that. I think I'm going to leave it right there. Now, you can always play with it and get it just, exactly right, because that's what we want to do. But I'm going to try it right there. I think I'm pretty close. So I'm going to leave it there, and if I turn it any more, that actuator is going to spin. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to very carefully, again, lift it off, place my thumb. You can see now the new position that thing's in. It was sideways. Now it's almost vertical. So now I'm going to press my finger on there and tighten these up without having anything move. So you got to be very careful here. So that's 1. That's 2. And the 3rd one's on the back side. Okay. Now, counting counterclockwise as far as it'll go, it should be the exact alignment that I need for my exit drive hub there. So I'm going to drop it back on, and yeah, see now I can't physically turn it anymore. It's as far as I can turn it counterclockwise, and it's firm. So I'm going to replace these 2 screws. I'm going to test it to make sure that when I enter my code and pull my lever down, that this tailpiece will actually rotate now. So I'm going to enter my code. The code on this particular one is right out of the factory, so it's 2 and 4 at the same time, followed by 3. I'm going to pull the outside lever down. As you can see, my tailpiece did rotate. So all the way counterclockwise as far as it'll go, test my code, and the tailpiece rotates. So now that I've got rotation on my tailpiece, I know it's acting right, it's performing like it should. It looks like I've gotten my angle right. Now, I could be wrong, but at this point, we would already go ahead and have our exit device mounted, making sure that inside our hole, that drive assembly is dead center of that hole. So then I'm going to take my reinforcement plate, I'm going to lay it on top with the countersunk portion towards me. Then I'm going to use my countersink screws. and I'm going to mount my reinforcement plate, which is going to be my mounting plate, to my actual lock body itself. Well, getting them all started before you tighten them down is always a good idea. So I'll get them all started here, and then I will tighten them down to make sure that it's going to securely hold that back plate to that lock body. And now they're all firmly secure. So I'm going to look at my exit hub, make sure it hasn't moved any on my exit hub here. Make sure it's as far counterclockwise as it'll go, and it is. Then I'm going to line my tailpiece up. Turn it around where I can see the tailpiece there. So it may go out of camera view for just a second. I think it's right. Maybe my angle is just a little off. Let me double check. All right, almost to the retraction point. Making sure it's turned counterclockwise. Let's give that a go again. There we go. I think my exit hub had rotated slightly. So now we've got it. We're going to use our threaded ones out here because this is what our through bolts are going to connect to. Table's almost too tall, I almost can't see around it. Get these lined up. There we go. Last two. I just can't see around that table. There we go. And standing on my tippy toes, get the last one in. Now we're going to take our non-threaded bushings and we're going to seat them in the holes that we've drilled all the way through the door. And using our through bolts, go ahead and connect it to the door itself. And this will work with most exit devices on the market. I'm just using two of our precision models here today. One with our center line drive, and then one that's got our offset drive, just showing you that it can be done with both. If it was this one, there would have been really no tailpiece adjustment. It would have just gone right through this hub and operated just like it came out of the box, so we wouldn't have to fool with our 3 little set screws. On this one, however, this one you do have to adjust that timing on that tailpiece to match the timing on the exit device hub itself. So we'll get those put in. And if we did everything correctly, we should have a functioning outside trim at this point. So to test that, we're going to enter 2 and 4 at the same time, followed by 3. We're going to pull our lever down, and if our timing's right, this latch should come all the way back flush. And it did, I believe. Yeah, it is flush. So my timing is right. Now, if my timing was a little off, it could have only come back that far maybe, or not even that far. So we need to make sure that it goes flush with the body itself. So we're going to put our cap on just to make sure that it is completely flush. And of course, this will vary from, you know, different manufacturers' hardware, but this is the general idea of how to actually get that timing right on that, that tailpiece. Because that is probably the only thing we see in the field. Oh, I can't get that one screw to start. Everything we see in the field on installation that's not correct, that's what we see is the timing's not right. Just make sure you get the timing right and you'll be very satisfied with this device. Matter of fact, this is out of our whole Simplex lineup. This is probably still one of my favorite Simplexes, and I've been training on Simplex locks for many, many years. And I accidentally really love this lock. As you can see, it even looks really, really good when it's mounted on the door. And it will work with the majority of the exit devices out there. We do have them listed on our website, the ones we have tested and know it'll work with. There may be some others we haven't tested. I've actually put 4 different devices on this same mount to test them all, just to make sure. And so far, I haven't found one it hasn't worked with. So now we've got the case cover on. Going to go ahead and enter my code again, make sure it comes flush with the case. And yes, it is completely flush with the case. So that tells me our timing, as you can see, it's completely flush. You can't see any of it. So that tells me that our tailpiece and our alignment hub is actually in the exact spot it needed to be. Now, if it didn't come all the way back or it felt like it was going too far back, you're going to have to adjust that rotation with those 3 Allen screws again and tweak it just a little bit to get it where it pulls it flush. But I think we got that one, I think we got lucky on that one, got it first time. So now the next thing we need to do is change the combination, because all the locks come on the same code, 2 and 4 at the same time, and 3. So teach you how to change the code real quick, very simple process. That's where your little Torx wrench comes in. There's a little screw at the top. We're going to remove it and set it aside for just a second. And then we're going to clear the unit. We're going to enter our existing combination. We're going to take our little pick tool now, and we're going to go right through that hole where that screw was, and we're going to push down, and you should hear a click. And there's the click. So now we're going to come back around. We're going to clear it one more time, and we'll just, for simple sake, we'll just put in 1, 2, 3. Then we'll test it, and the latch should be fully retracting again. And then simply to finish the project off, just return the screw. And then later down the line, most of these installs, the cores aren't available. If the cores are available, of course, put that on before you mount it. But generally, the cores won't be on premise, so somebody else may bring you the cores later. Just make sure that that timing piece down in there, that actuator, is actually timed correctly. You'll know if you get it wrong, because you stick the core in there, pull the key out, and pull the lever down, and it retracts the latch. That means the timing's off, just 180 degrees, reinsert your core back in there, pull it down, and it shouldn't retract it at that point. So that's the install video of this. I appreciate you guys being here. If you have any questions, let us know. But great lock, works well, many, many years. Thank you guys for being here.